unfiltered discussions, unexpected guests. No topic is off limits, from sex and relationships to the human condition, personal anxieties, and so much more. The only talk show of its kind in the world. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
Hello and welcome! For those who've been following the continuing saga about my tiny black cat Tomato, no update. He just had a normal day, which, given his behavior in the past few weeks, is a good thing. Check out past updates about Tomato on our podcast that you can find at www.lastshow.pizza. That's lastshow.pizza, not .com. And catch our back catalog, including Tomato updates. Okay, tonight's show. We will analyze all kinds of conspiracy theories surrounding Katy Perry's trip to outer space for 10 seconds on Jeff Bezos's private rocket or whatever. A lot of people don't believe she really went. What are those conspiracy theories? We'll dig into in about 10 minutes. Then, imagine preparing for every scary public speaking thing or difficult conversation you're going to have with your boss using a VR simulation. It's not science fiction, it's science reality, and we'll dig into when and how you can prep for scary things in your life using AI and a VR headset. We got a lot to cover. Let's jump in.
Want to be part of The Last Show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
Ever had that dream where you leave something behind in an Uber? Maybe it's your phone. Maybe it's your dignity after sending texts drunk. Now imagine it's your small kid, 5 years old, asleep in the back seat. Imagine this happens to you, and Uber decides it's not their problem. Well, that's exactly what happened to a Toronto mom during March break. She and her boyfriend had 4 kids between them, a number I believe is legally called a commotion. And after a Raptors game with their children, they hopped in an Uber because of a flat tire. In hindsight, the flat tire was the second worst vehicle-related thing that happened to them that night. The mom's 5-year-old fell asleep in the back of the car. You know, like the real back of the car, that spot where if you're quiet enough, nobody remembers you exist. Back there. Classic youngest sibling move. The couple decides who's going to unload what and when, and while the mom was grabbing the garage opener to her home, the Uber driver, thinking the ride was done and the car was empty, just drove off with the 5-year-old still inside. Now, if you're wondering how Uber responded when the mom called them to panic, they told her to fill out a form. A form! Because when you lose a child in a moving vehicle, what you really need is administrative paperwork. Nothing calms a parent who's just lost their child's nerves like bureaucracy. Ma'am, we're sorry your daughter's gone, but on your computer you can press Control-P to print. Now, when she called the cops then called Uber for help and got shut down as well. Uber told the cops to submit a form too. They asked for an emergency disclosure request from the cops through a public safety portal. I don't know what that is, but I'm sure it's located somewhere between terms of service and go screw yourself. Meanwhile, trying to help the woman, the police did what Uber would not. They actually tried. And thank God they did. They found the 5-year-old about 90 minutes later, safe but hysterical, with a very confused driver 20 kilometers away. The driver had no idea the child was back there, which says a lot about his spatial awareness and possibly his need for bifocals and maybe hearing aids. Now get this, to apologize, Uber gave the woman a $10 credit. $10 for losing a child. That's not an apology. That's a passive-aggressive middle finger with a coupon attached. That's like burning someone's house down and then offering them a scented candle. Uber, to their credit, perhaps, says they're reviewing the incident and claims safety is a top priority for them, which is similar, I believe, to the way eating a pizza at 2 a.m. is part of a balanced diet. Now, if you're wondering what our friend Carmi Levy thinks of this, Carmi's a regular on this show and a professional decoder of tech nonsense. Well, he was quoted as saying it's yet another example about how customer service disappears in the gig economy. Sure, you get a cheaper ride with an Uber, but when things go wrong, it's like trying to contact God through a chatbot. Now, the mother of this temporarily lost child, who, I gotta tell you again, is fine, the child is okay, she wants policy change, not hush money. She even said, and I quote, "You could offer me $1 million. If there are no policy changes with Uber, I will not accept it." Wow. Now there's someone who can't be bought, at least not for $1 million. And to a company that talks in dollars and cents might be the first time Uber's heard that sentence. Usually they hear something like this: "You could charge me $1 million and I'd still use you because the subway smells like boiled despair." Bottom line, when you're a parent and a tech giant company shrugs at your missing kid like you've left behind a sock, something in the system is broken. It's not just in the app, but in the way we let companies hide behind policies when real people panic. There's nothing like a missing child that illustrates this more, because if the algorithm can find me a car in less than 3 minutes, it should be able to find a 5-year-old stuck in a back seat. Just a thought. Some people chase clout, and others chase coconuts, but this story has both. First, let me tell you about the North Sentinelese. They are a small group of indigenous folks living on a remote island in the Indian Ocean. They are an uncontacted tribe. They've been there for tens of thousands of years, and they've made one thing very, very crystal clear to outsiders. They don't want company. No texts, no tweets, no strangers on podcasts. These remote islanders just want peace, harmony, spears, and maybe a mango or two. They want to be left alone. Honestly, relatable. I get too hostile when someone tries to make small talk at a coffee shop. Now, our story. A 24-year-old American YouTube video creator thought, "You know what this uncontacted tribe in the Indian Ocean probably needs? Me. And a Diet Coke." Nothing says cultural sensitivity like barging into protected land with a soda and a GoPro and messing with indigenous islanders. It's like showing up to a silent yoga retreat, blasting Pitbull. So this guy, and I won't name him because that would give him just what he really wants, illegally landed on North Sentinel Island, hoping to make, quote, friendly contact with the islanders. He brought a coconut, a can of Diet Coke, and the kind of energy you'd usually see in people trying to vlog-splain cryptocurrency. He stayed on the island for about an hour, filmed the beach, blew a whistle like a lost lifeguard, and shockingly, none of the uncontacted tribesmen came running out to thank him for the refreshment. After returning to his boat, local fishermen, knowing that visiting this island was illegal, saw him and immediately reported it. I guess these anglers thought he was annoying. Probably because he was out there treating a sacred, restricted island like it was part of a scavenger hunt. And yeah, I doubt he yelled, "But I'm an influencer," at the fishermen. But spiritually, emotionally, I feel like he yelled that without using the words. Now, this YouTuber was apprehended with sand samples that he collected from the island, and now he's sitting in an Indian jail awaiting a court appearance. He's facing up to 5 years in prison for violating strict laws to protect the island and its people from outside contact. They want to be left alone. And while these laws may sound harsh, keep in mind, these laws are about literally preventing the death of everyone on the island via Instagram photos. Let me explain. The uncontacted Sentinelese tribespeople have no immunity to modern diseases. They've had no contact with outside humanity. Even a mild sniffle or cough from a YouTube bro could wipe all of them out. And this guy didn't just happen on the island by accident. He did his research. He studied the tides. He studied the routes, the access points. Just not apparently ethics or history, including the part where other uninvited visitors had been killed before by arrows. That's right, these islanders have killed those who sought to mess with them, which I think means telling the world less, "I wish you were here," and more, "If you come here, you're dead." Anyway, the U.S. consulate is now involved, likely sending someone to gently explain to this young man that international law is not a vibe, it can't be broken. I'm not sure they'll be able to help. He knowingly broke the law, and while I can't say for sure what will happen to him, I can say this. That can of Diet Coke is probably still on the beach, warm, unopened, and rightly ignored by a fair, noble tribe, the North Sentinelese, who are slightly violent outsiders. Okay, after the break last week, Katy Perry and a bunch of ladies flew up into the outer space area around Earth. But a lot of people think that didn't happen, that it's a conspiracy. We'll look at that and what really might have happened after the break. I'm David Cooper. This is The Last Show.
The Last Show with David Cooper, where we apply quantum mechanical, psychoanalytical astrotherapy to your problems.
Katy Perry went to space last week. Yes, really. Or did she? She flew with an all-woman crew on Jeff Bezos's Blue Origin rocket. 11 minutes in space they spent. Or so we were told. And now conspiracy theorists, of course, are calling it all fake. The evidence, perfect hair, a smooth hatch, and something about a fake hand. I am here. It's Conspiracy Corner with... I'm here with. It's Conspiracy Corner, and I am here with. Did I get it right the third time?
I mean, that sounded right, eventually.
Humber Radke, a conspiratorial studies professor.
And you totally nailed that.
At Humber Polytechnic. Check out his podcast, The Uncover Up Conspiracy Cast. Just look Uncover Up. You'll find it. It's a great show. Nathan, welcome in, my friend.
Thank you for having me on.
Would you go to space if you had infinite money like Katy Perry?
Absolutely, 100% I would. Apparently, there is something that happens to you when you see like the curvature of the Earth, and you, of course, all the cliched things. You notice there are no borders, there are no distinctions. And I kind of liked what William Shatner said when he came back, and he said, it's just all death out there. It's just death, all death. And so it does sort of give you an amazing appreciation for this sort of incredible thing that we have down here. It's just that we're standing on it all the time. We don't appreciate it.
It's called the overview effect. And I got it when I heard Carl Sagan, you know, the old science educator, astronomy, physics educator. He convinced the Voyager satellite team. Are you aware of this?
This sounds familiar.
So Voyager satellite is the furthest out satellite we have. It was one of the first, big launches in the 70s. I think it's out of the solar system at this point. But when it was just around, I want to say Saturn, could have been Jupiter, maybe Uranus. He convinced NASA to spend the money and the energy and the satellite research time, whatever, to turn the thing around and take one last photograph of Earth from, let's just call it Saturn.
Yep.
And it's this tiny blue dot that is in the background with the stars. And it's called the pale blue dot, the photograph. And it's the most unremarkable photograph you can see. The Earth almost looks like a star, if not for a slight blue tinge. And it gives you that overview effect of like, wow, we are but a speck. We are a speck upon a speck in the universe.
Yeah, the fact that that's such an unremarkable picture is the thing that makes it such a remarkable picture. Everything we've ever done, everything we ever do, everything we will ever do, it's just a little tiny speck, completely unnoticeable in the vastness of everything.
My ex-wife and I used to fight over, I would say, I'm going to colonize Mars if I ever can. And she's like, I'm not going with you. And we get in these big fights about it. I'm not sure they were jokes or not in hindsight. I think they were. Katy Perry, though, she had the cash. She had the clout. She's got the celebrity. She's got it all. And she went out to space on Jeff Bezos's rocket. Could they have spent the money on, I don't know, treating people better and closing the wealth gap and feeding those who are hungry? Maybe, but who cares? Whitey's on the moon.
That's right. Or did she?
Yes.
Of course, is the thing.
Yes.
Although I gotta say, before we get into it, I'm a little disappointed in modern day conspiracy theorists. People used to come up with wild claims about how the American government faked the moon landing to win the Cold War. And now we're getting Jeff Bezos faking 11 minutes of zero-G Katy Perry. It just feels like the stakes are a lot lower these days.
It does. But people love celebrities. People love conspiracy theories. I get it, kind of, because it's like, what is she doing in space? I grew up with this notion of an astronaut being like a great, patriot. Like they worked for the country. They worked for Canada's space program or NASA, and they trained, and they weren't rich, and they're the best of the best, and that's who made it up there. That's who made it on the moon. That's who got to work on the rockets. That was my image of what space exploration, space travel was. And then all these private companies come and just throw that. Now it's who's got the biggest wallet.
Yeah, I mean, at a time when people were worried about inflation and layoffs, having a big, expensive public spectacle seemed to be in a little bit poor taste. It just wasn't reading the mood of the room. And then a lot of people compared this tiny, short little bit of space tourism with those two astronauts who had been stranded for 9 months. And people talked about, well, there's no scientific purpose to this, has a negative environmental impact. The whole thing feels like a cynical PR stunt. But Katy Perry didn't do herself any favors by promoting her new album and singing a song rather than like looking out the window and trying to get the overview effect. And then, of course, after she lands, she holds up a flower, she kisses the ground, and the dunking on social media was absolutely epic. And also even in more professional think pieces, to the point where Wendy's, the hamburger chain, jumped in on the pile and tweeted out, "Can we send her back?" Which was an oddly spicy take for a burger chain to take, I thought.
I agree, but when astronaut Chris Hadfield, the Canadian guy who was on the space station, plays a song in space, a David Bowie song, everybody pats him on the back. Side note, I am banned from ever interviewing Chris Hadfield again for reasons I cannot say. I won't be answering any of your questions there. It's weird. When it's done for profit, we get the ick. When it's done by astronauts, even if it's the same thing, even if they're like eating a hamburger or, you know, unpaid brand ambassador because they brought some product up in space, we don't care. But we seem to get very upset when celebrities do it.
Yeah, and I think it's because we have this sort of unusual relationship with celebrities. And it is also why this particular story was so primed for conspiracism. Because already anything about celebrities, you know, we're going to have conspiracies about it. Anything about space, we're going to have conspiracies about it. You put a celebrity in space, it's going to guarantee that the conspiracists are going to be sharpening their claws on the story.
All right, let's stop the stream of consciousness odyssey that I'm leading everybody on. Why do people think Katy Perry's space trip was faked?
Okay, so specifically the argument here is that the entire thing had been faked with CGI or AI, and they brought to the table what they considered to be evidence. You mentioned at the beginning this idea of hair. Well, in the footage from the capsule, Katy Perry's hair was not out of control enough, they say, for her to be in zero G. And they point out that in footage from the space station, astronaut Suni Williams' hair was just a wild scene, like an absolute nest, and that Perry's hair, relatively tamed and under control. Conclusion? The whole thing was faked.
Don't celebrities have access to the best of the best with hair stuff, whereas astronauts might not?
I mean, you make an excellent point. Also, Perry was in space for about 11 minutes, and Williams was in space for 286 days. Perry almost certainly had product in her hair weighing it down, and Williams didn't have access to hair gel or a stylist.
I'm just doing the math here. 286 days is at least 5 to 6 times more than 11 minutes, so it would follow that her hair is all messed up.
I think your math checks out there.
Other reasons?
Well, people circulated a photograph of the capsule on the ground after it landed in which you could see through one of the portholes, and it clearly looked as though there was a mannequin rather than one of the celebrities. People pointed out that the hand you could see was clearly plastic, that the sleeve the hand was coming out of looked totally different from the spacesuit that we saw in the pictures of Katy Perry. It was a less shiny material. And I've looked at the photograph, and I agree, it definitely looks as though it's a mannequin rather than one of the astronauts. And so again, we might have case closed here. The whole thing was faked. But the reason that the hand looks like a mannequin is because it is the hand of a mannequin, because the photograph that's been circulating was taken of a totally different spaceflight in 2017, which was not Katy Perry, but a crash test dummy nicknamed Mannequin Skywalker.
Okay, so it's just the wrong photo.
It's just the wrong photo.
Any other reasons people think this was a conspiracy theory?
Doorgate. In the footage of Jeff Bezos opening the capsule, before he gets to the door, you can clearly see the door opening inwards and then quickly closing again. People say, wait, that doesn't make any sense. You can't have a door that opens inwards and outwards in a pressurized craft that has to deal with the vacuum of space. But during a test run in the 1960s, the Apollo 1 capsule burst into flames and trapped 3 astronauts inside who were all killed. And so since then, it's standard operating procedure. Make sure the capsule doors can be opened from the inside or outside. So what almost certainly happened here, someone on the inside opened the door and then realized, oh, wait, Bezos is going to want like a publicity shot here. Quickly closed it again so he could have his big moment of opening the door.
It's almost like there's reasonable explanations for all these theories, and they probably did send these celebrities out into space.
Yeah, you say that, but there's one more bit of evidence we haven't gotten to. We'll get to after break.
Whoa, look at you doing the tease. I'm here with Nathan Radke. We're going over Katy Perry's alleged space flight and the conspiracy theories surrounding it. It's Conspiracy Corner. We'll be back with more of this in a moment.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. Broadcasting intimate details and useless information from an undisclosed location in New York City. The Last Show with David Cooper.
Last week, Katy Perry, well-known celebrity who plays musical songs and stuff, flew up into space on Jeff Bezos's Blue Origin rocket with a team of other women. 11 minutes they spent in space, but the internet has gone wild with conspiracy, so we're going to talk about that here with Nathan Radke on Conspiracy Corner. He's a he's a conspiracy studies professor.
That's the one.
That's the one. I mean, you do both, so...
Yeah, but I'm trying to make my own discipline here. I think conspiracy theories are important enough that they deserve their own title at this point in academia.
Okay, so you're just like on the university website and you just put conspiracy studies and you just wait until someone tells you no?
Exactly.
All right. Well, Nathan works at Humber Polytechnic. If you want to call the school and say, hey, why is there no conspiracy studies department? Probably don't, because he'll get in trouble. Nathan, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back.
Katy Perry flew out into space. People think the photographs of her hair were too perfect. People think a photograph of the space capsule that wasn't the actual space capsule they were in is evidence that she didn't actually go up there. There's another piece, though.
Yeah, I mean, so far the evidence hasn't been working out too well, but there's still one last premise that I think is going to convince you. If you take the Blue Origin mission patch, of course, Blue Origin is the name of this project that Jeff Bezos is doing to get to space. If you take that mission patch, if you turn it upside down, it looks like Baphomet.
Baphomet?
It looks like Baphomet.
What's Baphomet?
I mean, it's a long story, but to make it short, a demon. It looks like a demon's head. If you flip it upside down, looks like a satanic demon head.
It's like with the Monster Energy drink, the logo, the weird M, if you turn it upside down, it looks like a 666, and which is evidence that Satan is running the Monster Energy company.
Exactly. Of course, as you know, and I know, and people listening know, this is not evidence of any of that kind of thing. It's evidence that our brains are really good at seeing patterns where there aren't any and just turning a bunch of meaningless nonsense into something sinister and ridiculous.
Let me ask you something. The dollar bill with the pyramid on it, the US dollar bill with the weird Latin and the I in it, it's almost like they're trolling us, you know? It's like in plain view, there's this weird symbol on everybody's dollar bill, and it's like, why is it there? Why is it a pyramid? Why is there an I in the pyramid?
Especially because everybody knows that eyeball in the pyramid is the symbol of the Illuminati.
Yes.
Everybody knows that.
Everybody knows.
Everybody knows. The Illuminati didn't know that because the actual symbol of the Illuminati was actually a circle with a book with an owl sitting on it.
Oh. What is the all-seeing pyramid, though? I'm like, why is it there? Anyway, it's just a, little tangent here that I like to go on. But I get it. I get there's secret symbols. My friend's a Freemason, and he's like, it's basically just a drinking group, and we sometimes do charity, and we just meet. But he's got like a special little handshake, and he saw a patch on someone once, and they just sparked this conversation, and because he noticed like a symbol on, it was a security guard. The other Mason was a security guard.
Right.
There I was on the street with my friend and a security guard, and they were like, what lodge you in? And I was like, what is happening here with the symbols? I get the temptation to try to look for symbols. I also watched this TV show, Yellow Jackets, where there's this weird symbol for 3 seasons now they haven't explained.
Yeah. And I mean, because anything that seems kind of secret, it's easy for it to get the air of something sinister. And so, again, it makes perfect sense why this is happening, why people are making these big jumps. Also, it's just a lot easier these days to believe that something's been faked. We don't live in the age of the reliable, trustable image anymore. It's way too easy to fake something convincingly. And this has got 2 really unfortunate consequences. 1, people can easily fall for fake videos, which is a problem. And 2, people can believe that real videos are faked, which is also a problem.
Yeah, you can't trust what's true, and then people tend to trust what's not true. It's a real problem out there. Mis and or disinformation.
And then when we get all these distracted by these sort of ridiculous fake conspiracies, we miss out on some really interesting conspiracies because there are some genuine, legit space-related conspiracies that did happen and people should know about.
Tell me about them. If I should know about them, tell me about them.
Lake of the Space Dog. This was the first mammal ever to escape Earth, sent into space by the Soviet Union in 1957. It was a big deal. This was the space race. This was the Cold War. This was a triumph of like Soviet technology and industry. And so according to the Soviet government, they blasted Leica off into space. She orbited the Earth peacefully for 7 days, looking out the window, being a very confused dog, but a very good girl. And then she was gently put to sleep because they had figured out how to get something safely up into space, they said, but they hadn't figured out how to get something safely back yet. But as it turns out, they were lying. They hadn't really figured out how to get something safely into space either, because the truth is that Leica's capsule had malfunctioned and she had died within a few hours of liftoff. So basically, the Soviet government had murdered a dog in the most elaborate and expensive manner imaginable and lied about it until 2002.
Wow. So Leica died and they just had a Leica double come back to Earth and be like, oh, this was great. Everything's fine.
Oh, they just told people, no, she's up there. She's fine. She's looking out the window. She's doing a fine job. But meanwhile, it was just the corpse of a dog circling the Earth.
Ugh, awful. Other space conspiracies, maybe American ones, because the Soviets and the Americans were neck and neck there in the 60s.
Yeah, in fact, if anything, the Soviets were a little bit ahead. And so the Americans, feeling like they were losing this race, they came up with Project A119, 1958. And to sum it up, they were going to nuke the moon.
Got to nuke something.
You got to nuke something. I mean, theoretically, to give them their, to be generous, some analysis could probably be made by observing the material that was ejected from the moon's surface during the explosion. So maybe you could do a little bit of scientific research there, but mostly it was just to pull off like an astronomical flex because the Soviets are winning.
Literally.
Yeah, exactly. In both senses of the word. And there had been a rumor spreading in 1957 that the Soviets were going to set off a nuke of their own on the moon. And you can't have a moon nuke gap in the Cold War. So the Americans are like, well, I guess we got to nuke the moon ourselves. Now, it wasn't like it was going to break the moon in half or something. Because of safety concerns and because there was some question about radiation would make future exploration hazardous, it was a tiny little nuke, 1.7 kilotons. But they didn't do it because it was mad and because it was dangerous. And it turned out later that the Soviets did have a plan to nuke the moon, but they only came up with one in 1958, not 1957. So what actually happened was that there was a false rumor of a Soviet moon nuking project, which caused the Americans to start a moon nuking project, which then encouraged the Soviets to start a moon nuking project.
And I don't know why she swallowed the fly. I'm glad they didn't nuke the moon, for reasons, but it's a fun thing to imagine. I mean, imagine looking up at the moon and seeing a huge explosion on there. It'd be pretty cool.
I mean, based on my experiences with other things like lunar eclipses and solar eclipses, I feel like we get all excited and we go out there with our binoculars and it would just be cloudy.
It's more about the friends you make along the way. The last partial eclipse here, I was at the dentist's office and we all left. Me, the hygienist, the dentists, we all went out there. Me and the dental crew at the practice went out. There's about 7 of us. I was the only non-person who worked at the clinic. And we all took photos. And now there's a photo of me on the wall. But when we actually looked at the eclipse, we stole some glasses from little kids because we didn't have them. It was, it was fine. Whatever. So it's about the friends you make along the way when it comes to displays on the moon.
Yeah, and it's also about that when it comes to conspiracy theories. It's one of the main reasons that people believe in them, because it allows us to do something together as a group.
So it's not about believing that Katy Perry faked her space exploration. It's about the friends you make along the way.
That's kind of true. As extraordinary as that is, it's sort of true.
Nathan Radke, a professor of conspiracy studies, host of podcast The Uncover Up. You just gave what we did on this show meaning, a purpose, a moral. You wrapped it up with a clean knot. I really feel like we learned something today.
Well, I mean, that's why I'm out here. That's why I'm out here.
Nathan, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Are you the kind of person that replays a hard conversation you got to have in your head like 1,000 times before you've had it? Or do you have trouble public speaking, making friends at parties? Well, I've got news for you. What if you could play out these tough situations using virtual reality and have a fake person respond back to you just like the real person would? Well, it's all possible using VR, AR, and LLMs. What do those letters mean? I don't know, a bunch of nerdy simulation stuff, but a rehearsal for your anxiety using computer avatars. That's what we'll cover on the other side of the break.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. The last show with David Cooper. Procrastinate your life away with us.
Ever practiced a hard conversation in your head like 1,000 times only to panic and forget everything when the actual moment for the conversation comes? If so, then our next guest might just have the thing for you. She's leading a project that uses virtual reality and augmented reality to help you practice real-life stressful situations. You know, like public speaking, parties, tough conversations. It's rehearsal for your anxiety, but with computer avatars and hopefully no sweaty palms. Her name is Anna Fang. She's a PhD researcher in human-computer interaction at Carnegie Mellon. Anna, welcome to the show.
Hi, David. Thanks for having me. So excited to chat a bit about what we've been working on.
I really hope of all the media appearances, this one wouldn't cause you any anxiety. But did you rehearse using your technology for this?
I did not.
Good.
Only because VR gives me a stomach ache, actually. So although I build with it and I build tech with it, I actually don't use it that much myself.
Oh, it gives you like vertigo, the spins?
Yeah, it gives me like headaches and like stomach aches. And I don't know why. I just never really adjusted it. So when we have to test our tech, I often have my research assistants like do it for me so that they can experience it. And I'll just like watch through the webcam basically about what they're doing.
That is so sad to me that you research in this area and you can't enjoy it without getting the spins or whatever.
I know.
Let's talk about the research though. Walk me through what this is. Is this like a practice for stage fright? Is this Toastmasters? What exactly is the project and how do you use it and how do you study it with people who are hopefully going to have a stressful conversation with their boss and have it be a little less stressful?
Yeah. So essentially what we're trying to do is use, like you said, virtual reality and augmented reality, actually combined with large language models and kind of the way that we can currently with tech create pretty realistic scenarios and in virtual environments to basically simulate really stressful things for people that we deal with in our everyday lives. So things like public speaking or conflict with your partner. And we want to use this tech actually to teach people self-care skills and mental health skills so that while they're in those scenarios in real life, they've practiced and learned these skills in a virtual and a safe environment, and they can hopefully transfer it to the real world. Yeah.
As a divorcee, I'm a model example of what to do wrong when you're getting divorced. This would have helped me so much like 10 years ago when I was splitting from my ex.
Yeah, it's so interesting because we were really motivated by like two huge gaps that we notice in current technology and in like people's needs. The first is that stress is something that's part of everyone's day-to-day lives. We don't talk about it all the time, but people often are actually, it's not just you, like generally people are pretty bad at managing stress and hard things in their everyday lives. Usually we lean on things like just bearing through it or sometimes distraction. But people don't often have like concrete ways to actually alleviate those feelings when they appear. But the second thing that we noticed was that even for the applications that people do have access to practice stress or anxiety relief, so like meditation apps, for example, they often use imagery that's like a beach or like a forest, either through verbal or visual stimuli. But when you're actually in the real world encountering stress, like you don't have access to like a beach or forest to like run to. The huge majority of us don't have access to a beach or forest to run to. And so you can't even transfer those skills into your real world life. Like when you're going through a breakup, for example, like you're in your office space, you're in your classroom, you're in your relationships and conflicts with others. And so our tech is kind of trying to fill this gap where we can actually create transferable skills to the real world.
I absolutely love it. I used to be scared to raise my hand in class. Like I had public speaking issues. The way that I handled it is I started doing stand-up comedy, which gave me such extreme adversarial public speaking scenarios that normal ones, like, you know, giving a presentation at work, became a lot easier. It was sort of like exposure therapy.
Exactly.
which I think is a really good way to do it. But with stand-up, you're in front of an audience and they hate you because you suck. At least that's my experience. This, you can go through these scenarios without actually having any adverse effects. You aren't bombing. You're just kind of practicing. Walk me through how the actual experiment works. I put on a headset. I type the prompt into some sort of ChatGPT-like thing, and then it simulates the scenario.
Yeah, exactly. So the current tech that we have simulates 3 different scenarios that are the most common stressors or fears for everyday kind of experiences of life. So they are public speaking, a crowded social party, like a party where you don't really know anyone, and interpersonal conflict. And these are 3 things that have been successfully simulated before. And they're also known from like lots of different research and literature, known to be really, really common among people. People at least have one of those usually. And so it depends on the scenario, how the tech works, but it all kind of follows a similar pipeline where you put on this headset, you can do virtual or augmented reality. So you can still be in your real environment if you want to do augmented reality. And you can type into a prompt like a topic of that conversation. For example, you could type breakup and actually have that interpersonal conflict be about breakup. We actually simulated it a lot with like roommate conflict, for example. For public speaking, you can enter in a topic of your speech and what you want these avatars to ask you questions about and really grill you about. And then when you're in that scenario, you'll see a bunch of avatars pop up. If you're in virtual reality, we'll put you in a classroom if you're doing public speaking, for example. And then you can hit a button on your controller at any point while you're interacting with these avatars and navigating the scene. You can hit a button on your controller to bring up actually like a deep breathing bubble, sort of like a visual blue orb that like floats and like contracts in front of you. And you can practice your deep breathing and self-soothing. But our hope in the future is to build out a lot more features. So we want to add in, we're actually currently adding in muscle relaxation, like grounding visual techniques where you can like look around the room and identify objects. That can be really good for panic attacks, for example. So we're trying to expand that even more, but that's kind of, yeah, the way it goes.
The people using it, are they just doing it in a trial-like environment? What I mean to say is maybe I'm participating in your research, but I'm not actually going through a breakup. So I'm just doing through this breakup. Or are you doing it with people with their real life scenarios? Let's say I do need to have a conversation with my boss. I come and participate in your research and I actually go through what I'm really struggling with. Is it more the first one, more the second one, a bit of both? And if it's the second one, if it's people going through real life stuff, does it help them?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So the study that we're actually going to present it in Japan in just a couple of weeks at a conference there. So the study that we've completed is essentially more the former of what you're talking about. It's more play scenarios. We bring people into, the research site, but we're also kind of, there and they know it's a research study and they're probably not revealing their deepest, darkest secrets in that lab environment. But actually our current study that we are like basically starting right now in terms of the user part of it and the pilot setting of it, we are actually sending the headset home with a full fidelity application of what I just described to you, but it has kind of more features like muscle relaxation, for example. We're actually sending that home with over 50 people. So we have over 50 headsets that are going out to people and they get to use it for 2 to 3 weeks. And then we're going to bring them back in and basically ask them like, what did you talk about? What were the stressful situations that you were dealing with over these past few weeks? How did it make you feel, et cetera? And so I think we're expecting during that 50 people study, it will be much more the latter of what you were referring to, where people are using it for their own lives and own situations.
Anecdotally, I know you haven't done the trial or the research yet. Have there been people who have had minor breakthroughs using this stuff to help them with anxiety?
I think so. I think what we've seen so far is that people absolutely do lack self-sufficient skills for taking care of themselves. People often don't really have any skills that they're kind of used to using in these real life scenarios. For a lot of people, it's not even just calming them down in the moment. It's them realizing that they're stressed in a moment. It's bringing more awareness to their like bodily sensations during this virtual environment, et cetera. And I think people really, really love the technology. We're still building it out for full fidelity and like deployment on the App Store and things like that, but it's going really well.
I'm here with PhD researcher in human-computer interaction at Carnegie Mellon, Anna Fang, discussing VR headsets to help you with stressful moments in life. Anna, thanks for sharing your research with me. This sounds like something we could see coming in the future to help people with performance anxiety, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I think so. That's our hope and that's our plan. And yeah, thanks for having me.
After the break, measles. Outbreaks are happening. Is it coming for you, your community? And if so, what should you expect and how to prevent it? We'll give you some measles info in just a few moments. See what I did there? I'm David Cooper. This is The Last Show.
Smart, sharp, and slightly unhinged. Late night's fresh perspective. The Last Show with David Cooper.
Measles! Outbreaks are happening. Is it coming for you, for your community? And if so, what should you expect? That is what we'll discuss with infectious disease specialist at the University Health Network in Toronto, Dr. Isaac Bogoch. Isaac, happy measles to you.
Oh, God. Yeah, I'm not sure how to respond to that, David, but happy to chat about the measles and hope you're having a good one.
What I meant to say was thank you for being here. And yes, okay, for those who don't know anything about the measles because they thought it was a disease that was taken care of and we were all vaccinated for it, what makes it so contagious and why is it so hard to contain once an outbreak happens?
So I love the way you started this because I think most people don't think of measles as an issue because vaccines were so successful in almost eliminating this from Canada and many other parts of the world. And in a way, we're sort of victims of our own success. We don't remember how bad it was. And now we're seeing the resurgence, not just of measles, but of other vaccine-preventable illnesses. It is a very, very transmissible infection, probably one of the most transmissible infections on the planet. Meaning if someone has measles, here's an example. If someone has measles, they go into a room, let's say it's a doctor's office, and they're sitting in the waiting room, and then they leave that room. And then a non-immune person comes into that room, 1 or 2 hours later. There's a high likelihood that that non-immune person will get the measles in the sense that that tiny little virus can float around in the air and has a knack of finding non-immune people. So it's very transmissible. And, there's this myth, in the past, everyone used to get measles and everyone was fine. And that's only partially true. Yes, in the past, everybody did get measles because it's so damn contagious. But everyone wasn't fine, and there's a lot of morbidity and even mortality associated with measles. Even in this era, there's about 100,000 people that die per year from measles. The vast majority of those are children living in, sadly in low-income countries. But that's still 100,000 mostly preventable deaths per year. And if people say, okay, but that's, those are low-income countries. We live in Canada or United States or Europe. But if you look at outbreaks in high-income countries like Canada, the United States, and European countries, the hospitalization rate is still pretty high. It's anywhere from 10 to 30%, depending on the outbreak. So it can still pack a punch. And, we had a death in measles in Canada last year. There's been 2 deaths from measles in the United States during this most recent outbreak. So yeah, this is preventable. The vaccine obviously has been around for decades. We have decades and decades of safety data. It is extremely effective at preventing measles infections. It's free and it's widely available across the country. So yeah, on the one hand, sure, there's no reason why we should be seeing outbreaks of measles in Canada. On the other hand, I think it's worth exploring why we're seeing outbreaks of measles in Canada so we can address that head on.
I think vaccine hesitancy is the main reason. I think what happened with COVID, a lot of people were given disinformation, and now they're hesitant about all vaccines, even ones that have been around a long time and are proven to be safe over decades and that eradicated a disease that was perhaps more dangerous than COVID, at least the mutations that exist now.
Well, I think when you say vaccine hesitancy, I agree. I completely agree. But there's lots of different drivers that feed into that. And when we're talking about measles, and to your point, yeah, of course, we cannot ignore hesitancy that developed throughout the course of COVID. We can't. That is for sure contributing to some component of this. But I think we also have to rewind and look back much further. We've had outbreaks of measles long before COVID. And, I think we have to go back to the late 90s where there was the famous retracted false paper that was published in the Lancet, falsely linking measles vaccination to autism. Again, like I said, that was retracted, but like that was over 25 years ago, and we're still reeling from that. I agree. COVID and some of the misinformation and disinformation and even messaging from various groups, including some in public health.
Now, public health now.
But there's a lot of drivers for this, and that's one of several. But this hesitancy goes back a long way. I think the other thing we have to consider too is there is truly a weaponized disinformation machine that is churning, that amplifies real disinformation in social media. Sometimes it even makes its way into mainstream media, and it has real world consequences, right? We know that, when people are presented with an option to, vaccinate themselves or their child for measles or for other vaccine preventable illnesses, we obviously want people to make a smart choice based on reason, data, logic, safety data, et cetera, and say, yeah, here you go, no problem. But now we're seeing people not do that. The other thing too is beyond vaccine hesitancy. I think there's just some people that missed a dose of it. We saw like the complete destruction of many public health programs throughout COVID as well. Some people, might have missed a dose or two here and there and just weren't aware that they missed a routine childhood immunization. We have a lot of newcomers to Canada that might not speak one of Canada's 2 official languages and might not know where to go or know what to do. Or, people might work 3 jobs and they just can't go between 9 and 5 to a vaccine clinic to get their child vaccinated. So yes, hesitancy is a significant pillar, but I think there's other reasons as well. And under the hesitancy umbrella, I think there's lots of drivers to that as well.
A good point. Let's talk about those real world consequences for measles. You mentioned 10 to 30% of people who get it will be hospitalized. What are some of the other telltale symptoms?
So first of all, if someone's exposed to measles and they're not immune, they have a high likelihood of getting this infection. It typically has about-ish a 2-week incubation period. And then, the first few days of infection are pretty non-specific, right? It's fever, cough, runny nose, there's a million infections that cause that. But then after about 2 days of that, there's this telltale rash. It's this explosive rash that goes all over the body. It's called a morbilliform rash. Lasts for a few days. People are contagious a few days before the rash, and a few days after the rash presents. And it's true. Yes, most people survive, and most people recover, but there is significant morbidity associated with that. So again, in high-income countries, anywhere from 10 to 30% have landed in hospitals during recent outbreaks. And the reason is it can really do a number on the immune system. So the measles virus itself can cause some harm. It can cause, for example, inflammation of the brain and spinal cord. You don't want that. And that can be, pretty significant and land people in hospital. But it can also dampen the immune system. And so a lot of the morbidity associated with measles is associated with other superimposed infections. So pneumonia is very common. Diarrheal illnesses are very common. And those bring young kids and toddlers and kids who are too young to be vaccinated for this into the hospital. They're more vulnerable to these infections. And sometimes, sadly, people succumb to this illness. It's awful. And it's preventable.
Is the disease losing its, quote, elimination status? And if so, what we can do? And I already know the answer. It's get the jab.
Yeah, I mean, this is, the answer on one hand could be really easy, right? Like, hey, this is a routine childhood immunization. The first dose is given at year 1. And it's as simple as that. But of course, it's more complicated than that because, as you point out, there is vaccine hesitancy. And the real question is, well, how do you combat? And the answer is a fewfold, right? One of them is we've got to lower barriers to vaccinations, right? Ensure that vaccines come to the people rather than bring people to the vaccine. People are busy. People might not have a family doctor. People forget. But the other thing, too, is there are people who are hesitant for whatever reason. And here's my opinion, we shouldn't be shaming and blaming. Let's listen to them. Let's take their concerns seriously. Let's address their questions in an empathetic manner. Let's address their questions in a fact-based manner. Let's bring them back into the fold rather than shaming and blaming and labeling people as an anti-vaxxer. I think that's how we really, really do this and provide people with high quality information so that they can make smart decisions for themselves and for their families.
No one in the history of those who've held non-mainstream beliefs have changed their views by being made fun of or shaming them. So I think that's a very good point. Dr. Isaac Bogoch is an infectious disease specialist at the University Health Network in Toronto, Canada. Isaac, what a pleasure it was talking to you.
Nice to chat, David. Thank you for having me on.
In just a few moments, we'll discuss how Generation Z, or Z in Canada, women are now favoring age gap relationships. And it's not the reason you think. So why, just a few years ago, if an older person dated a younger person, we'd all gasp. And now it seems more normal. Just think White Lotus. We'll discuss this after the break.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. Prepare to have your mind blown as we delve into the complexities of relationships, explore the cutting edge of science, and celebrate the bizarre and beautiful absurdity of the world around us. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
Gen Z, or Gen Z as they say in Canada and the UK, women are increasingly dating older men. And it's not for the reasons people might assume. Behind this shift are forces at play like values, compatibility, and the growing disconnect between young men and young women. Here to unpack what's really going on in this new age of age gap relationships is author Chloe Combi. Check out her Substack, The Generation A through Z. Chloe, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me.
The big idea here, the big thing that you're trying to say in what you write, why do you think Gen Z women are increasingly drawn to age gap relationships today? Like, I was watching the show White Lotus last week, and there's a few of those portrayed in the show.
Yeah, so there's a bit of a kind of an evolution, really, because, and this is what really interested me, it was actually a conversation about the White Lotus that kind of really triggered this. But you know, for the last 40 years, like, and I think it's particularly pertinent in like the UK and Europe, and I think probably in the US and Canada as well, it was very permissive through the 80s and 90s and noughties, the kind of dynamic of particularly the older man and pretty younger woman, and there was millions of kind of celebrative examples of that, some of them really quite icky. And then I think about a point about sort of 10 or 15 years ago, kind of when Gen Z came of age, there was suddenly a real break put on that, and particularly by Gen Z, who kind of thought that those relationships were incredibly predatory, and not to kind of libel myself, but I think particularly, you know, people who indulged, if not didn't have their careers ended, there might have been career consequences. I think the kind of the Drake, Kendrick Lamar thing is a really good case in point of that. And I kind of thought that was 2 or 3 years ago, I would have absolutely said that's the end of acceptable big age gap relationships. There was a bit more kind of acceptability. You know, we've seen in the media a lot about like older women dating younger men and things like sort of Baby Girl and Good Luck Leo Grande. But generally speaking, I think Gen Z were quite negative. And in TikTok, there were some, you know, really quite extreme things said about these type of relationships. But in the last sort of 2 or 3 years with this research that I've been sort of doing, kind of as Gen Z get older and thinking about Gen A and how they're different to Gen Z, I've noticed there's been a lot more age gap relationships that I've naturally been talking about. And then I did a talk the other day with quite a big group of young women who were all 18 and going off to university. So we were talking about kind of like, you know, the next step. And it was the day after the White Lotus finale, and they were all buzzing about it. My expectation was that about the kind of the Rick Chelsea dynamic, they'd all be like, because they are distinctively, there is an age gap, and a distinct one would have been like, ew, gross.
Yeah.
But they were quite the opposite. And what was really interesting that started to make me think about the research that I've been doing is, as we see this kind of divergence between young Gen Z men and women, culturally, politically, ethically, socially, in so many ways, you know, and there's really big, you know, fixed examples about that, the difference between how sort of Gen Z men and women vote in very recent elections, which obviously links to lots of other kind of ideologies and beliefs. So I sort of said to them, you know, why, you know, you're clearly quite positive about this kind of Rick and Chelsea thing. And it was really interesting. And they said, I totally get it. that she would go out for like this kind of slightly older, grumpy, murdery guy, as opposed to the F-boy Saxon. And the girls were like, you know exactly already. We know guys like him, how he'd vote. He'd be the type to say, I believe in women's rights, but the type of, influencers and creators who listened to that influenced him. And they just sort of said, they really get this attraction to someone like Rick as opposed to Saxon. And I think it really crystallized the work I was doing. And I can sort of see and understand why that shift might be starting to become more pronounced.
Between my girlfriend and I think if we had seen that age gap relationship portrayed in White Lotus a few years ago, we would have poo-pooed it. But what I'm struck by as you mention this, I don't think her and I talked about it once. We just watched the show. We enjoyed them as a couple. They had their issues for sure, but never once did we discuss, it's kind of a bit icky that this older guy's with this younger woman. And I'm struck by that because that seems like something we would have discussed just a few years ago. And now I'm thinking, how did this shift happen? What role did the media have in this shift?
Well, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because, if you think about really big shows recently, they've shifted. Like, for example, as I wrote in the piece, in 1999, which isn't that long ago, there was a 34-year age gap between Sean Connery and Catherine Zeta-Jones in the film Entrapment. The film Love Actually, which is a really big film here that came out a few years later in 2005, the Keira Knightley was 17. She was a 17-year-old girl who was, married in this relationship. And even though they weren't so explicit about the age that she was, nobody even really noticed those things. And so there was a profound shift about 10 years ago. And I think it was particularly propelled by TikTok, where there is a galaxy of really, really kind of judgmental voices, particularly from Gen Z, and particularly directed at older celebrity men who, are sort of coupling up or after older women, younger women. And it's not even jokey cradle snatchers. People come out now and say that's predatory, and so it's no longer kind of a badge of honor that it might have been in the 80s and 90s when you saw rock stars get off with much younger models. And I think both, in terms of our culture and in terms of people's everyday lives and choices, that has been avoided. I'm not saying that they've gone away, but I think it was no longer that kind of badge of pride that it was a few decades ago. But no, absolutely. If you think about kind of recent culture, and the big age gap relationships have been depicted in a much more positive way, or in a way that we didn't even notice, which I think underscores a sort of a fundamental shift, that suddenly somehow something shifted and people are less judgmental. And equally, I think one of, the really big films of this year has been Baby Girl.
Sure.
With Nicole Kidman, I can't remember what the male actor is called. And that kind of has caused a little bit of controversy around the edges, but it was more about the kind of the sexual content in that.
And the power dynamics, like she's the boss, but maybe not so much the age.
And exactly that. So it feels like we're about to go through another evolution. And I don't think it's about to be that we're suddenly going to be fine with, seeing 30 or 40 year age gaps, though maybe we will. But I looked into it, and in the White Lotus dynamic between Rick and Chelsea, there's supposed to be more than 20 years between them, which is a fairly extreme age gap. So that indicates to me, not only do lots of us not notice it, but if we did, it was perceived positively. And if we did, it was perceived positively next to someone like Saxon, who's that kind of traditionally good-looking rich boy, then we clearly are going through some sort of shift, which, as I say in the piece, maybe we're going back towards being much more kind of values and focused, and are we sort of compatible, and do we gel well as a couple, as opposed to kind of ticking boxes in terms of like, age, wealth, which largely, I think, by and large, I think is a good thing. And as I say in the piece, if a relationship feels like it's mutually respectful and both needs are being met and there is an equal power dynamic, then I don't think we should get too hooked up on age.
Tell me a little bit about this manosphere. It does seem like a certain segment of Gen Z men and millennial men are sort of into characters like Joe Rogan, who aren't a great influence, and who women are saying they don't want to date men their age because of it.
Yeah, the manosphere has become distinctly shaping, I think, of Gen Z men who've kind of come of age, which is really significant, been listened to in their really formative teen years. And it's not so much the whole getting ripped thing or hanging out with your bros thing, or even the kind of conservative values things. It's quite a high hostility to kind of equal rights and women's lib and really equality in a fundamental and genuine sense. And for young women, that's going to be quite jarring. So if there's a difference between a 19-year-old their own age who's a big Andrew Tate or Joe Rogan stan, and maybe a 25 or 26-year-old who's like, no, I'm cool with feminism, equal rights, then obviously you don't need to be Sherlock Holmes to figure out which one might be more appealing to them.
Well, you can check out Chloe Combi's writing on this subject in The Independent, or check out her Substack, The Generation A through Z, or Z. Chloe Combi, thanks so much for doing the show.
Thank you.
Up next, psychologists are saying work wives and happy hours are becoming extinct in the office. So we'll tell you how to bond with your coworkers and why workplace culture is shifting after the break.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. We're here because your heightened awareness deserves heightened entertainment. The last show with David Cooper.
Once upon a time, you could bond with your coworkers over bad coffee, broken printers, or even a mutual disdain for Gary from accounting. But now, it's all Slack chats, solo lunches. At work, we're lonelier than ever, even though we don't want to be. Workplace psychology professor Craig Jackson is here to explain why office friendships are fading and what we can do to bring them back. Craig, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, David.
Let's start with the obvious. Why are office friendships disappearing? Why are they endangered? Is it just remote work, or is there something deeper going on with the workforce these days?
The slow endangerment of workplace friendships, I think, is due to a number of factors. But I think it's worth remembering at this stage, I don't think workplace cohesion is going to die out. And I don't think we need to be worried that we'll all be clocking into mechanical isolated cubicles like some dystopian sci-fi film of the future. But workplace is certainly changing and evolving, which is natural. But what we can certainly say is that since COVID and the lockdowns and the stay-at-home orders, especially in the UK, where we've been quite slow to return to pre-COVID working styles, there have been a number of changes. Certainly, more and more meetings are still taking place online in Teams and Zoom, and more individuals are able to use what we call in the UK hybrid working, a mixture of going into the office and staying at home for about 50-50 in terms of the working week. But we're also seeing changes in people's attitudes to the workplace. One thing I think we saw starting before COVID was with the increase in diversity in many workplaces, that has also led to many workers feeling unsure or uncertain about their previous behaviors or actions. And I think we are seeing a little bit of safety behavior from staff, whereas once they go to a party and let their hair down, they may now go to that party, but be quite reserved and standoffish and not engage too much in case they say something they may regret later on. We kind of joke about this saying the death of the workplace wife. I think workplace wives still exist, but the cost of a workplace divorce can mean your livelihood, and people are very cagey about getting involved. So in essence, we're becoming a little bit more defensive and showcasing less of our true selves in the workplace. And that has led to a change in levels of sociability and activities. Certainly in the UK, we were famous, I think, around the world for clocking off after work and going down the traditional British pub and having a couple of pints and letting off steam. Well, British pubs are dying out. British pubs are being replaced by sushi bars and restaurants. So workers don't have anywhere to go after work, even if they felt they had the time or the energy or the money. And let's not forget, there's a cost of living crisis here. So many people literally cannot afford a couple of pints after work. A round of beers in the UK for, let's say, half a dozen of your colleagues is going to be well into £20-30 in a London pub. Many people just can't afford to be sociable with their colleagues anymore. So there's lots of factors coming together.
I worked in Silicon Valley in the most recent golden era of tech, like 2012 to 2020. And I'm struck by what you mentioned about people being more defensive, being more reserved around having dropped boundaries around coworkers. There was stuff that went on at work in that era, like going to the bar, all the coworkers, sleeping with each other. Stuff that if it went down today, I don't think it would fly. So anecdotally, I completely observe what you're talking about. But I lived that life. Let's talk about the younger generation who are entering work and they're not seeing this kind of like fun going to the pub after work culture. Do you think they want it? Do you think they crave it?
I think there's a slight change here. Of course, many younger people, and I'm in my early 50s, but I do work with younger people in the generation beneath me. They do still want work to be fun, but they know that work is not their only source of fun. So they have online relationships that are just as meaningful as real world relationships. But what I do also see an increase in with younger workers is that they do seem to take more breaks during the working day, whether they're for smoking or for vaping or for just going for a coffee to regenerate. And I see that happening much more than, say, older workers. And I certainly don't think that's a bad thing, because if it gets you through the working day and keeps you energized and productive, then lots of shorter breaks is probably better than a few longer breaks. And if they're sociable with other people, then all for the better. So again, it's just this natural evolution that we have in workplaces between different sectors, but also how different generations certainly work together and rub alongside each other. So the workplace is always changing, and that's a beautiful thing.
I've had a work wife in my past, that sort of like best friend relationship with bad boundaries that made my girlfriend nervous. I think it made my work wife's husband nervous. And when that relationship went south and when it went sour, it made working with this person very difficult. Do you think we're not seeing that anymore? And why not? And maybe it's a good thing that's going away.
This is what I love about the workplace. It's like a wonderful experiment that runs 5 days a week, 9 to 5. You wouldn't be allowed to do this with rats in a laboratory, but we're able to do it with humans. We take the best and the worst characteristics and put them together with other people in stressful and strenuous situations, and we see what happens. I certainly know that many organizations now are aware of the problems that workplaces between colleagues can cause. And some of them, although they may not encourage it, they do ask that individuals declare any such relationships with other colleagues to human resources. And they also think very carefully about what they're going into, particularly when that relationship does go south, because you may have to work with your ex-work wife for several years to come on projects. It's a very delicate, grown-up area that we need to be very mindful of. I think what we also see, though, in the UK, and I'm sure in other industrialized countries, still that most people do meet their future partners in the workplace. That statistic has not changed. So I think what that means is that lots of people get together at workplaces, but don't declare it for a long, long time. And they have these illicit workplace relationships, maybe testing out the waters to see actually, is it worthwhile going public with this after 6 months and making go of it? But I still think the statistics show the majority of marriages are made through people who meet in their work. Now, that may be client customers, not just people working together, but client customer relationships as well.
When I mention work wife, I mean very close friend. I don't necessarily mean romantic, but I suppose those lines can get crossed. Executive isolation. Tell me what it is. But I was never in an executive, but when I got promoted to management at my tech job, I felt very isolated from my friend group. Is that what this is? Is that what executive isolation is?
Yes, in the UK, we have a saying, we hate it when our friends become successful. And you're all working together and one of you becomes the boss or a manager. It really does change that dynamic. Where you were together against the management or the boss, now one of you is a representation of the boss. And it certainly does lead to difficulties on both sides. Do you invite your former friend, now the manager, to the after drinks party? As the manager, do you turn up or not? I've found in my experience and my research, the best thing you can do to end executive isolation, where those in charge feel alone and detached from their former friends and colleagues, is you still got to stay in touch, but keep it at a minimal. So my advice, for instance, is that if you are now the executive, go to that party, go to that function, buy a round of drinks, stay a little while, and then clear off. So the other people can still let their hair down and even bitch about you if they need to. But what you must not do as the executive is dump your problems down on the so-called little people. If you've got problems because of your executive role, moan about that to the other executives. Leadership isn't about dropping your problems on those folks below, who, let's be honest, will earn less than you, but probably do a lot more work than you. So it comes with responsibility.
We're talking a lot about this workplace shift in feeling lonely and detached at work, but are there upsides to this hybrid model? Are there upsides to working at home?
What we found from lockdown and still is that people, when they work at home, they get to avoid the expensive and stressful commute, which on a public transport system could mean an hour in the morning, an hour in the evening. Getting rid of those 10 hours of stress means that workers have more time to spend with friends and family and doing meaningful things. So there are a lot of upsides to still allowing people to work from home where possible.
Craig Jackson is a workplace psychology professor at Birmingham City University and a chartered psychologist with the British Psychological Society. Craig, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, David.
After the break, I'll be joined by an addiction and counseling expert to answer the question, how do you tell if your loved one is grappling with addiction? And if you can spot it, how can you help? On the other side of the break, we'll pick that apart together. I am David Cooper, and this is The Last Show.
Your nightly rebellion against predictable radio and podcasts. The Last Show with David Cooper.
Drugs and alcohol can quietly take over someone's life, the life of someone important to you. And sometimes, how do you notice? Sometimes you want to help. When the signs are real, how do you help without making things worse? I am joined by Yonah Budd, Chorus's addiction and counseling expert, to discuss. Yonah, oh my goodness, what a pleasure. Thank you for joining.
Oh, it's great to be here with you, brother. Thank you.
I was that loved one for many years, and the signs were obvious. I was just drunk all the time. But I think for some people, they suffer quietly. They drink when they're alone. They do drugs that you wouldn't otherwise know that they were doing. Maybe they do them with you and you think you're doing a normal amount, a healthy amount. For you, it's like a once a month fun night, but for them, it's a every night a month fun night. I think there are ways here to really like see it happening. And then helping is this whole other issue.
Yeah, great conversation, great subject. So we got to talk about whether these are people that we're close to, people we have a connection with, we see regularly, talk to regularly, close friends, maybe family members, whether we're talking about someone's kids or, someone's significant other, somebody at work. I get a lot of calls from people say, listen, I think I got a buddy at work that's having a hard time. I really don't know what to do. Like, can I approach him? Can I not approach him? So maybe if we have the time, we can get to that too. But essentially, we have to start paying attention to the people around us that matter the most. We seem to pay attention to their haircut, or you just got your teeth clean, or, really swift jacket, or lovely dress, or great new kicks. We look at their clothes, their shoes, their hair, jewelry, maybe a new watch. We don't pay attention, and we need to start to pay attention to how come like he's missed a couple boys' nights, or how come she never came over Friday night like she's been coming for 6 months, or how come I saw him yesterday in exactly the same clothes he was in the night before and said he was at home sick with the flu, but I saw him at the liquor store. Like, we have to start thinking outside the box if we feel there's a concern. I don't think that we all want to run around with eyeballs like, paying attention like someone's warden or master.
Yeah.
But the question is, how do you know? So behavior, weight loss, change in attitude, not showing up for stuff, lying, stealing, and cheating you, telling you stuff that's not real, maybe grabbing something off your coffee table that wasn't theirs. Who knows, right? So when we get deep into addiction, as we make bad choices. So paying attention to those bad choices.
Is there a difference between a bad habit and a full-blown addiction? Because I know people with like bad drinking habits, but they keep it under wraps. Like they can go a week, 2 weeks without drinking. When they do, they might binge. It's not healthy, but I wouldn't say like their job, their loved one, their relationships are at risk. So to me, there is kind of a difference between bad habit and addiction. Do you see a delineation there?
Yeah, for sure. I think, picking your nose is a bad habit. I'm not sure it's an addiction, right? Playing with your hair can be an obsession. So we have to look at the difference between obsessions, addictions, and bad habits. That's a whole nother world. I live in the world of OCD. I do things that are repetitive. Are they habitual? Sure. Are they bad habits? Not for me, but they are habits. So I think the difference is, and I tell people like this, are the drugs doing you or are you doing the drugs? I know a lot of people that can do what we call white knuckling. I'm sure that's an expression you've heard before.
Yeah.
They can white knuckle, Monday to Friday at 4:00. And by Friday at 6:00, they're either hammered, drunk, high, stoned, or something else, right? So, or off to the casino to blow their wad or whatever it is they're going to do. Everybody, deals with their discomfort in different ways. If you're doing your drugs and alcohol because you've had a crummy day, then it's a problem I think one needs to look at. If you're drinking with a bunch of buddies and you're getting hammered and having fun and kind of celebrating the weekend and you're not trying to get numb, you're just trying to get a buzz, different conversation.
For me, it's like if you take it away on a given night, what happens? Can you take it away on a given night?
Exactly.
Because for me, that's when I started to realize it was like, and there was never a right time to stop. Oh, I don't want to have a bad mood tomorrow, or oh, I want to have fun going out. When there's never a right time to take a night off, and you come up with convenient excuses, versus I can give it up for however long.
Well, if you're talking about someone and how they feel inside their own skin, dealing with it like you're describing. It's pretty simple. I mean, if you need something and you're not getting it, your body's going to get sick. You're going to feel sick. You're going to feel or edgy or in some way not healthy, right? Or not at your best. So if it's inside your own skin, if you're looking at someone from the outside in, like you and I looking at the loved ones or friends or neighbors and concerned about them, it's much more difficult to see what that looks like on the outside.
Let's talk about discussing it with the person in your life. Let's say a girlfriend, a boyfriend, a son. How do you broach the topic without sounding judgmental, without isolating that person, non-confrontationally? Or do we want to confront people who have addiction issues?
So the same intervention. I think it was a great TV show for a while, but not really. I've done probably 600 or 700 of them in my life, and they're really not, from certainly my perspective, an intervention has to really be a sharing of love and not a condemning in your face, you did this. So I tell everybody the same thing, whether it's a mother, a father, a brother, a loved one, brother, sister, boss, you have to have your conversations like this. I feel like, and then fill in the blanks. I feel like, there's something I'm missing with you. I feel like you're not at your best and I want to be able to help and don't know what to do. As soon as you start with you miss coming to my house, or you don't seem to look like yourself, or you aren't, telling me the truth about stuff. As soon as you start with you, they're immediately defensive, whether they're 13 or 73. We immediately go like this, right? We immediately back off. So never use the you word, always use the I word and make it about how you want to help.
It's a collaborative approach or an approach where it's based on your feelings. With the accusation, it's like an adversarial approach. You're going to get bad results.
Exactly.
Other things you can say or do with people around you who are struggling, let's just say alcohol, if that's a fun one. And they're doing it every night, and no matter what you say, they just keep on doing it. Do you let it happen? Do you draw boundaries?
So, after night 2, for me, I'm not there. So you don't want to enable the ability for them to do that. In other words, don't give them company if it's something you think isn't in their best interest. So don't give them company. And just say, hey, you know what, man, it's just not fun when you're this messed up all the time. And, if you want to talk about it, I'm here. Otherwise, I'm going home and I'm going to chill.
More things not to do. You mentioned when you do have a conversation with them, not accusing them, not saying you do this, you do that. Are there other things not to do around people who are struggling with substances?
Yeah, you don't want to guilt them. You don't want to use guilt. You don't want to.
Wait. As a Jew, I find that offensive. Guilt is like my way of love. It's my love language. Guilt.
Of course, but you're a Jew after therapy, so one would know you've got a little bit different. But and by the way, Jews don't own it. There's many other cultures that have guilt
yes.
down to a science. We can get into that another time. The things you don't do is you don't act as their therapist. You don't act as their warden. You're not their gatekeeper. You're not their judge, jury, or otherwise. And you're not their savior. So you don't want to be there saving anybody that doesn't want to be saved, so to speak. All you want to be is the friend, the family member, the loved one. and be as supportive as you can and say, listen, I'm here when you want me to be. But what you don't do is you don't force them. Come on, we're going to rehab right now. I'm taking you down to detox. Like, unless somebody's going to hurt themselves, and that's where the games change, hurt themselves or others, we have to respect boundaries until someone finds their own motivation.
You're reminding me of that Amy Winehouse song, but maybe she's a bad example. Very bad example indeed.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, Yonah, it's I feel like this was a boom, boom, boom chat, but we got some helpful nuggets in there. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, I'd love to do this again with you, and we can chat some more about it. But, the real, and it's not just about drugs and alcohol. People that are in abusive relationships, the same thing goes, and so on. You want to make sure people are living their best lives.
Yonah Budd is an addiction and counseling expert. That's our show. Thanks for tuning in. If you missed any part of tonight and you want to get caught up, or you're going to miss a night, check out our podcast. Just head to www.lastshow.pizza. That's lastshow.pizza, not .com. And there you can find out more info about our podcast. Give us a subscribe. Follow us on social media. I will be here back tomorrow night. And